Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's topic is historical background of Indian polity. In this video, we are going to study the MCQ question first and followed by the explanation for the question. Starting with the first question, which act marked the beginning of parliamentary control over the East India Company? Right answer is option B, Regulating Act of 1770. The Regulating Act of 1773 marked the beginning of parliamentary control over the East India Company. It established the office of Governor General of Bengal, with Warren Hastings as the first Governor General of Bengal, and created Supreme Court at Calcutta. Which act created the office of Governor General of Bengal? Right answer is option B, Regulating Act of 1773 created the office of Governor General of Bengal. The Regulating Act of 1773 created the office of the Governor General of Bengal. Warren Hastings was appointed as the first Governor General. The Act also formed an executive council of 4 members to assist the Governor General. The dual system of governance was introduced by answer is option B, Robert Clive. The dual system of governance was introduced by Robert Clive in 1765 after the Battle of Buxar. Under this system, the British East India Company held Diwani rights, while the Nawab retained Nijamat functions, maintaining law and order. Which act designated the Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of India? And the right answer is option B, Charter Act 1833. The Charter Act of 1833 designated the Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of India. Lord William Bentinck became the first Governor General of India under this Act. The Act aimed to centralize administration, gave the Governor General legislative power over all British territory in India. Which act allowed missionaries to propagate Christianity in British India? Answer is option C, Charter Act of 1830. The Charter Act of 1813 was the first to officially allow Christian missionaries to propagate Christianity in British India. It ended the monopoly of the East India Company over Indian trade, except for tea and trade with China. Who was the first Governor General of India? Right answer is option D, William Bentinck. Lord William Bentinck was the first Governor General of India appointed under the Charter Act of 1833. Before this, he served as the Governor General of Bengal, but the Act 1833 expanded his authority over all British territories in India. Bentinck is known for key social reforms, including the abolition of sati and effort to propagate Western education in India. Which act established a system of open competitive for Indian civil service? And the right answer is option C, Charter Act of 1853, open competition for Indian civil service. The Charter Act of 1853 introduced the system of open competitive examination for recruiting the Indian civil service. This ended the earlier system of nomination-based appointments, making the civil service more merit-based and inclusive. Its India Act 1784 introduced by answer is option A, Board of Control. Its India Act of 1784 introduced dual control over British India by the British government and the East India Company. It established a board of control in Britain to supervise civil, military, and revenue affairs, while the company retained commercial functions. Government of India Act 1858 transferred powers from the company to the and the answer is option B, British Crown. The Government of India Act 1858 transferred the administration of India from the East India Company to the British Crown. It marked the beginning of direct British government rule in India, also known as British Raj. The Act established the office of Secretary of State for India, who was responsible for Indian affairs in Britain. The Secretary of State for India was created under which Act? Right answer is option B, Government of India Act 1858. The Government of India Act 1858 established the office of the Secretary of State for India to oversee Indian affairs. The Secretary of State was supported by the Council of India to advise on Indian governance. The Indian Council Act of 1892 introduced the concept of right answer is option B, elected members. The Act introduced indirect elections, allowing local bodies like municipalities and universities to recommend members to legislative councils. It expanded the size of legislative councils at both central and provincial levels. Members were given the right to discuss budget and ask questions, enhancing legislative function but without voting power. The Marley-Minto reform are associated with the act of. And the answer is option B, 1909. The Indian Council Act of 1909, also known as the Marley-Minto reform, expanded the legislative councils and introduced separate electorates for Muslims. It increased Indian participation in governance by allowing more elected members. Which act introduced separate electorates for Muslims? And the right answer is option C, Indian Councils Act 1909, also known as Marley-Minto reform. The Indian Council Act of 1909 introduced separate electorates for Muslims, allowing them to elect their own representatives. This was intended to protect Muslim political interests and ensures their participation in legislative council. Under which act were Indians for the first time appointed to the Viceroy's Executive Council? And the right answer is option C, Indian Councils Act 1909. The Indian Councils Act 1909 allowed the first Indians to be appointed to the Viceroy's Executive Council, including notable members like Satyendra Prasad Sinha and Gopal Krishna Gokhale. The term communal representation was introduced by. And the right answer is option B, Indian Councils Act 1909. The Indian Councils Act 1909, also known as Marley-Minto reform, introduced the term communal representation through separate electorates for Muslims. This system allowed different religious communities to elect their own representative to the legislative councils. The Montagu-Chelmsford reforms were associated with the Act of. Right answer is option C, 1919. The Government of India Act 1919 introduced the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, expanding legislative councils and introducing diarchy in provinces. Diarchy divided provincial subjects into transferred, that is administered by the Indian ministers, and reserved, that is controlled by the British governor categories. Which act introduced diarchy at the provincial level? And the right answer is option B, Government of India Act 1919. The Government of India Act 1919 introduced diarchy, that is dual governance, in the provinces of British India. Under diarchy, provincial subjects were divided into transferred and reserved. Transfer subject were maintained and managed by Indian ministers, and reserved subject were under the control of British governor. The system of bicameralism was first introduced in British India by right answer is option A, Government of India Act 1990. The Government of India Act 1919 introduced the system of bicameral legislature at the central level in British India. It created two houses, the Council of States, that is known as Upper House, and the Legislative Assembly, known as Lower House. Which act is considered the longest act passed by British Parliament at that time? And the right answer is option C, Government of India Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 was the longest and most detailed act ever passed by the British Parliament until that time. It consists of 321 sections and 10 schedules, covering a vast administrative structure for India. The Act aimed to establish an all India federation and introduce provincial autonomy and bicameralism in more provinces. Which act introduced diarchy at the central level? And the right answer is option B, Government of India Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 introduced diarchy at the central level, extending the concept beyond provinces. It divided central subject into reserved, controlled by the Governor General, and transferred to be administered with Indian advice. The Federal Court was established under which act? Answer is option C, Government of India Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 provided for the establishment of Federal Court of India. It was set up in 1937 to resolve disputes between provinces and interpret constitutional matters. Which was the first act to provide for the establishment of a Reserve Bank of India? Answer is option B, Government of India Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 was the first to provide for the establishment of the Reserve Bank of India (RBI). The RBI was officially established in 1935 and it started functioning as India's central bank from April 1, 1935. Which act is often called the blueprint of Indian Constitution? Right answer is option C, Government of India Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 is often referred to as the blueprint of the Indian Constitution due to its comprehensive framework. It introduced features like federal structure, provincial autonomy, bicameralism, and fundamental administrative principles. Provincial autonomy was provided by answer is option B, Government of India Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 granted provincial autonomy, allowing provinces to function as independent administrative units. It abolished diarchy at the provincial level and gave elected Indian minister full control over provincial departments. Provinces were empowered to legislate on transferred subjects, enhancing Indian participation in governance. Under the 1935 Act, India was to become a federation if which group agreed? Answer is option B, princely states. The Government of India Act 1935 proposed an all India federation comprising British Indian provinces and princely states. The federation was conditional upon the accession of at least 50% of princely states, which act declared India an independent and sovereign state. Right answer is option C, Indian Independence Act 1947. The Indian Independence Act 1947 declared India an independent and sovereign nation, effective from 15 August 1947. It ended British rule in India and led to the creation of two dominions, India and Pakistan. Which body was formed to frame the Constitution of India? Right answer is option B, Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly of India was formed in 1946 to draft the Constitution of Independent India. It included members elected by provincial assemblies and nominated by princely states. The Assembly adopted the Constitution on 26 November 1949, which came into force on 26 January 1950. The Constituent Assembly was formed under the proposal of right answer is option A, Cabinet Mission Plan. The Constituent Assembly of India was formed based on the Cabinet Mission Plan of 1946, proposed by the British government. Members of the Assembly were elected by provincial legislative assemblies and nominated by princely states. The total number of members in the Constitution Assembly initially was. Right answer is option A 389. The Constituent Assembly of India initially had 389 members, representing British Indian provinces and princely states. After the partition of India and Pakistan creation, the number reduced to around 299 members. The Constituent Assembly held its first meeting on. Right answer is option B 9th December 1946. The Constituent Assembly of India held its first meeting on 9th December 1946 in Delhi. Dr. Sachidanand Sinha initially presided over the session as the temporary president. Dr. Rajendra Prasad was later elected as the permanent president of the Assembly. Who was elected as the first president of the Constituent Assembly? And the answer is option A Rajendra Prasad. Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the first president of the Constituent Assembly of India in December 1946. Later, he became the first president of Independent India in 1950. The Indian Independence Act 1947 was passed by. Right answer is option B British Parliament. The Indian Independence Act 1947 was passed by the British Parliament in July 1947. The Act came into effect on 15th August 1947, granting independence to both dominions. Which of the following Act provided for the abolition of the East India Company? And the right answer is option B Government of India Act 1858. The Government of India Act 1858 officially abolished the East India Company after the revolt of 1857. It transferred the administration of India directly to the British Crown. A new position, the Secretary of State for India, was created to oversee Indian affairs from Britain under this act. The term dominion status was first demanded in. Right answer is option D Nehru Report 1928. The demand of dominion status for India was first made in the Nehru Report of 1928, led by Motilal Nehru. It proposed India to be a self-governing dominion within the British Empire, similar to Canada or Australia. The report was a response to the Simon Commission, which had no Indian members and faced widespread opposition. The first Indian to be appointed to the Viceroy Executive Council was right answer is option B, Satyendra Prasanna Sinha. Satyendra Prasanna Sinha, later known as Lord Sinha, was the first Indian appointed to the Viceroy Executive Council in 1909. His appointment was a result of the Indian Councils Act of 1909, that is known as Marley-Minto Reform. He was made the long member, making a significant step in Indian representation in colonial administration. Which act is considered the base structure for the Indian Constitution? Right answer option B, Government of India Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 is widely regarded as the base structure of Indian Constitution. It introduced key features such as federalism, provincial autonomy, bicameralism, and a strong central government. Many provisions of this act were retained and adopted in the Constitution of India. Which act was passed as a result of revolt of 1857? And the answer is option B, Government of India Act 1858. The Government of India Act 1858 was passed in direct response to the revolt of 1857, also called as Sipahi Mutiny. It ended the rule of the East India Company and transferred control of India to the British Crown. The Act established the office of Secretary of State for India and marked the beginning of British Raj. Which of the following acts created the post of Viceroy in India? And the right answer is option B, Government of India Act 1858. The Government of India Act 1858 created the post of Viceroy of India, replacing the earlier title of Governor General. This change marked the beginning of direct crown rule after the revolt of 1857. Lord Canning was the first Viceroy of India, serving from 1858 to 1862. The inspiration for the concept of the directive principle of state policy in the Indian Constitution was drawn from and the right answer is option D, Ireland. The directive principle of state policy in Indian Constitution were inspired by the Irish Constitution of 1937. Thank you so much, guys. We have covered the background of Indian polity comprehensively. See you in the next video.